Hey everyone, welcome back to 996. The Howl. What started off as a pretty slow free agency for the Coyotes ended up being pretty good. Really, excited for the next season for the Coyotes. I loved what they did with the forward group. So many options. We'll get into it a lot. But the big one was Jason Zucker signing 1 year, $5.3 million. Obviously, a really big dollar amount. It's 1 year. You can do whatever you want with it. Trade him at the deadline if the team's not really going to push so much for a playoff spot. You could flip them or you keep them. You compete. You have meaningful games in March and April, but it won't affect us long term. I think the biggest thing for this free agency day, which I think the Coyotes did pretty well, all you had to do was not do something stupid, and the Coyotes didn't do that. So in those terms, they did a pretty good job. So 1 year, $5.3 million. He scored 27 goals last year for Pittsburgh. He had a couple rough seasons with Pittsburgh due to injury, but he finally got healthy. He had 48 points in 78 games played last season. He's 31 years old, so pretty much the oldest guy on the roster, along with Bjugstad, who came back. But I look to him to be a top six winger. He has a lot of effort in his game, competitiveness, has a bit of an edge to him, but he's not like a prototypical Bill Armstrong over 6 foot tall bruiser guy. He's going to be a scorer. He's going to make our top six even more potent and just give us so much depth where you can see here there's a rough draft of the forward group moving forward, but it brings some skilled guys further down into our lineup to finally have a third line who can score, which we haven't had in a while. So I'm liking that Zucker trade. Pretty big, biggest name we've signed in free agency, even though it's not long term, but the biggest name since what? Grabner, Ribeiro. The Coyotes usually don't get huge names in free agency. I liked what Zucker had to say about Arizona. He loves the visiting locker rooms, the fact that they have a little outdoor grass pad to play soccer before games and warm up. That was great to hear from a visiting team. And, he heard good things from his friends and Travis Boyd, Troy Stetcher, and Nick Bjugstad. So he wants to be here, and he was very, welcoming and glad that the team wanted him as well. So great job by Bill Armstrong. Then we get Nick Bjugstad back, which I didn't think was going to happen. Thought he would stay in Edmonton, but he comes back for 2 years now, not just 1 year. $2.1 million. Again, a little bit rich, but it doesn't really matter. We're above the cap floor finally, but still about $16 million in cap space to sign our restricted free agents remaining. Love Bjugstad. He worked really well with Krause and Michelli. I don't know where he's going to be, third line or second line center, but I like him in the second line position. Obviously, Zucker's not going to be third line. He'll be second line. Maybe Bjugstad and Zucker have some chemistry. They're more veterans in the NHL, and then you add a sharpshooter like Gunther. That could work out pretty well. But we'll see where Bjugstad lands. Maybe he just ends up back with Michelli and Krause because that line was money. And so maybe we get some other looks. We have options, and that's what I really love coming out of this free agency. We have so many options. We're very versatile. We're no longer restricted to like 4 centers and, this guy can't play in the top 6. He has to be bottom 6 like the Ritchie brothers or Cassian. It's a lot of these players could move around in the lineup now and give the coaching staff more options. We also signed another centerman who could also play wing, so he adds that versatility that I just mentioned. Alex Kerfoot from Toronto, 2 years, $3.5 million. I'm loving these timelines of years. It's just a stopgap, and it shelters younger players who are going to come in this upcoming season and even next season, like Cooley. So when Cooley comes next year, you have Kerfoot and Bjugstad to take some more responsibility away from Cooley. Kerfoot, he could play on the special teams, power play number 2, even the PK. Bjugstad as well plays on the PK. Good defensive forward as well. Zucker, he's going to play on maybe PP1, but now we have 2 really good power play units. You could grab about, 10 guys from here or 8 forwards from here and have really 2 good power play units, which we haven't had in a really long time. My whole hope going into this next season was being more potent Offensively, having a third line who can score and be more of a threat and be more competitive in every game up until the last game of the season. So I think these moves did that for sure. Troy Stecher also comes back 1 year, $1.1 million. The only player I had on my free agent board, and that was just a fluke. I just threw him in there because why not fill some space. No hard feelings with Stecher. Fine defenseman. It's cheap. It's 1 year. Hopefully he scores a bit more this year. Just great to have players love Arizona and want to stay here and re-sign with them. That bodes well, you know, against the media that says no one wants to be in Arizona. Stecher loves Arizona. All over his Instagram this summer, he's been in Arizona. So maybe he just becomes a guy like Galchenyuk, who we also signed 1 year, $775,000, a two-way contract. So he's not like I hope he won't be a Coyote to start the season. He is just an insurance guy if there's injuries, which there will be. And even if there are injuries, that versatility and the number of options the Coyotes have, that plays into a big role as well. Even like guys like Carcone, if there's injuries anywhere in your top six, you have guys who could move up. You could bring up Galchenyuk from the minors. Galchenyuk played 42 games last season for the Colorado Eagles. He played 11 games for the Avalanche, so he is now an AHL player. Don't get it twisted that he's a bona fide NHL player. Hopefully he starts in Tucson and helps Tucson get back to a more prominent role and make the playoffs and actually do damage in the playoffs. I would love that. But yeah, he was an injury guy, injury replacement guy, and the least amount of games he plays with the Coyotes, the better for me. I know a lot of people love Galchenyuk. This is his third time signing with the Coyotes or being part of the organization. I just never want to write his name down again. I'm not a huge fan of him. He's kind of fell off a lot, but I know a lot of fans like him. But, you know, I always say if there's a team to choose in the NHL where your career's kind of on the rocks, on thin ice, the Coyotes are the perfect organization because they're not afraid to just call guys up and throw them into the lineup and give them a lot of ice time. And with injuries, right now it's a bit thin. So any injuries in the forward group, like I said, he could make a call up and draw into the lineup. We also signed some depth guys in Crotty, a defenseman for the Roadrunners, and a goalie for a backup goalie or sort of a 1B, 1A situation for the Roadrunners. Villalta, I never heard of this guy before. He played for the Ontario Reign for a number of years. He was 12-8-1 last year for the Ontario Reign. 265 goals against average, a 910 save percentage, 24 years old. So they didn't go for that veteran, a minor league backup that I thought they would go for. They go for a sort of competitor for Prosvetov, maybe push Prosvetov to actually be good. And hopefully both Prosvetov and that goalie could really back up the Roadrunners and be a more competitive team. And then a couple days before the draft, Ingram signed. I believe I haven't mentioned Ingram yet. So he signs 3 years, $1.95 million. I said he would sign for 2 years, $1.5. Still a bridge deal, still around the same amount of money. I thought Ingram would go for 2 years, but he goes for 3 years. And this is a perfect contract for the Coyotes. They get him for 3 years. At the end of it, I think Ingram's going to be a bona fide starter, sort of like what Kemper became. And then maybe we move on from Vejmelka. We drafted 3 goalies a couple of days ago in the draft. So maybe Ingram becomes our starter near the end of this contract. Maybe re-sign him and he's our long-term goalie option. Or after 3 years, we look at our goalie prospects and we could comfortably move on. But it's cheap money for 3 years' time. It's a great, great contract for the Coyotes. Really happy about that one. And then players we lost, we didn't lose too much. Fischer and Imama. Fischer, the sentimental value of Fischer, the loyalty of Fischer is what hurts. It's not the on-ice play. Even though I did think last season was one of Fischer's better seasons in recent years. I think last offseason I was ready to walk away from Fischer. But this past season, I liked what he did. He was scoring on breakaways. He looked more energized. He scored the first goal at Mullet Arena. But the locker room presence, the loyalty, he was there at the town hall meetings and the debate with Schmaltz and Keller. So the fact that the Coyotes don't sign him, you know, rubs the fan base the wrong way, me a little bit. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a business. And the players we have now on this forward roster, I mean, I'd rather have Boyd on the fourth line, Carcone on the fourth line, Unique, just players that are more offensively capable than Fischer. But I understand, like, you know, I was even saying give this guy 3 years, 1.2, 1.5 million. He's done so much for the Coyotes. He wants to be here his whole life. I think just for that, they should have done it. I don't like the route it went, but, you know, at the end of the day, on ice, I could move on from Fischer, but it's just all the intangibles and the context and the off-ice situation. I know Keller and the fan base wants his team to be way more competitive, and they did that. I'm sure it hurt Keller, Schmaltz, Krause, and others to see Fischer go, but to get back character guys like Bjugstad and Stetcher, and then Zucker is, you know, poised to be another character guy in the NHL, makes him infinitely better. He's a scorer. He's a top 6 player. He'll make the team so much better. So hopefully that kind of eases off the movement from Fischer. And for me, that did, because I think it was announced Friday night they weren't going to sign Fischer. And that night was kind of hard to swallow. And into free agency day, the Coyotes didn't do anything for a number of hours. The only news was that we weren't getting Fischer, and he was signing with Detroit. So it was a hard pill to swallow, but to get all these guys signed, and it just makes our team better. And, you know, unfortunately, it happened. I wish Fischer was still with the Coyotes. Maybe not even play 82 games, just come in and out of the lineup. Maybe just be that locker room guy and stay in the press box a bit more, because of his on-ice skill just wasn't there. But I would rather have Fischer signed than not signed. But I understand why it happened. Bit unfortunate, but the team is better moving on without him. And I love how there's no more anchors on the team. Guys like Roussel, Ladd, Eriksson, Cassian, to some extent, Nemeth and Galchenyuk. Hopefully he doesn't play for the Coyotes this year. I'm happy that there's no anchors on this team. If anything, just O'Brien is the anchor that's left. But I know he's not playing 82 games. It's obvious he'll be the enforcer. And when there's a game that the coaching staff wants to have a fight or there's bad blood between teams, he would draw in. But I think the heavy lifting of the enforcement will be from McBain, Krause, sort of Bjugstad. He's a tall guy. He's like, what, 6'5", 6'6". Doesn't fight, but just, you know, he has a physical presence. Even Zucker, he's not a big guy, doesn't fight, but he plays that hard-nosed type game. And then you have Josh Brown on the back end. So, you know, really like that for the Coyotes. And then we lost Imama as well, who was our enforcer for the Roadrunners. He goes to Ottawa. We have given contracts and qualifying offers to Michelli, McBain, Unique, Nathan Smith, and Prosvetov. So hopefully we get news that they've signed those offers. And then again, this is what I've been referencing. Obviously, everything could move in preseason and game 1 of the new season. But I'm loving this. I'm loving that Kerfoot, Boyd, and McBain are all centers, and they could rotate, and you could shelter some guys in certain situations. You have a defensive zone face-off. You have 2 centers or 3 centers if you want to win the game, and a guy gets kicked out of the face-off dot. You have options. Just the only thing I would say that I don't like is, you know, we kind of don't have an identity on that fourth line. And I know I've been harping that I want the Coyotes to be more offensively potent, have more offensive prowess, and be more threatening. But at the same time, I just don't see this Bill Armstrong type fourth line. So maybe there's more moves to come. I'm surprised they didn't go out and sign Sundqvist, who's like 6'4" and is a centerman and is a bruiser. He would more fit the bill than Kerfoot. Kerfoot's not a big guy either, about 5'10". But he can play in all sorts of situations. So maybe there's still some inner workings to do for that fourth line. But it's really good. And it's just a stepping stone for the Coyotes to be more competitive. They're done with tanking. These moves obviously show they're not tanking. They might finish 10th last, between 10 and 14th last, maybe 9 and 13 last. But, you know, this isn't, if the outside people of outside fans of other teams look and be like, oh, the Coyotes are done rebuilding, and they see this roster, they're like, they're never going to win the cup. This is just a stepping stone and a stopgap. We still have all these young prospects coming up. We have Doan, Yannick, Nathan Smith in Tucson, and Zuber in Tucson. And then in their junior years, we have Cooley, Geeky, and Lamoureux, who should be coming to, the Roadrunners or Coyotes next year. And then you have Simashev and Boot, who are 2 years away. So they're going to start becoming competitive, start playing meaningful games down the stretch, and just getting better each year, adding in those prospects each year, and then still having a boatload of draft picks. They still have so many draft picks still, and they're done really tanking. They have 3 second rounds next season, 4 the offseason after next offseason. So they got so many draft picks. There's still a lot of options the Coyotes could do to grab more better players moving forward. But I love this step forward to just be a more threatening team and catch teams off guard when they play the Coyotes. They're not that basement bottom 5 team anymore. And hopefully, fans and more money gets put into the Coyotes because they're fun to watch, more competitive, maybe more merch sales with Zucker being signed. And they're just more fun to watch, and people are more invested, and the word of mouth spreads over Tempe and surrounding areas of the Phoenix metro area. They're not tanking anymore. You got to watch this team. They're winning games. They could get over 30 wins, and we'll see from there. Really happy with the direction. It shows me they want to be competitive, which is what I wanted, and these signings show that to a T. So that's it for me. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, spread the word. And as always, thank you for your support.